Hello and welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
All right, this one's a quick cut. This will be easy.
Yep, in and out.
That's right. Yeah, we can do that, I think. So it's been a while since we talked about like all the things that we've watched. Now I've been gone for a while, but I know that you've been busy watching shows and all kinds of stuff. I haven't watched too much TV, but we've both seen a few things. So I did want to talk about Black Panther 2, which we've both seen, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. I did want to talk about that. But I was actually interested in Black Adam because I have not seen that. And it looks interesting and I really like The Rock, but I wanted to get your take on it because you saw that recently.
I saw it twice.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, accidentally.
Okay.
I saw it when it came out in the theaters with my nephews. We had a blast. And then when I went to see my friends in Texas over the Thanksgiving holiday, it came out on Prime or wherever it came out.
Yeah, okay.
And so they were like, well, what movie can we watch but still talk through it? And my friend's son, who's a big comic book fan, actually, he knows a lot. That kind of minimizes his knowledge. I think I was telling you post podcast last week, I was trying to come up with references to like see where he was at. And I mentioned something about REM on David Letterman back in the 80s. He was like, oh yeah, Don't Go Back to Rockville. And they did South Central Rain. And I was like, how is it possible he knows that? He's like 30. But anyway, he's full of knowledge. So he said, why not Black Adam? And I was like, sure, I'll watch that a second time in the vein of we can still talk and all that other stuff. And both times were fun. It's a fun, harmless movie. The second time it was a lot easier to be a little bit sharper about it. And, we don't like to talk about negative things a whole lot in this podcast. We always like to start with the positive. The Rock is great. Aldous Hodge. Is it Hodge or Hodges? Hodge,
I believe. Yeah.
He's brilliant as Hawkman, although he's got the wrong colored pants on. As simple and as silly as that is, it bothered the hell out of me the whole film. I know it's silly. He's never worn burgundy pants, not in elsewhere. And if he has, please somebody tweet it to me. And that's fine if he has. It's just a simple, silly thing, and it means nothing. It's just how my brain works. I've never seen him. His costume is fantastic. Pierce Brosnan is great as Dr. Fate. The two other guys are underused, but they're cool to see. It's harmless. It's everything's been done before. The story has been told a million times before. Maybe if it was 20 years ago and it came out, it would be considered inventive. There's a few interesting things. You've seen him in the trailer already where he's flying and he kind of goes down to the ground and walks as he's flying. Yeah. That's very cool. There's a lot of cool things. There's a subplot with a young boy or young man, and I guess it's the father-son thing. I don't know why they had to interject that, but they did. It's harmless. It's It's fun. It does no harm.
So it's like a popcorn movie then. I mean, it's
100, and some candy and some licorice, even though I hate licorice, and some sweet tarts, even though I don't eat Fruity Tooty stuff. But it's a great Saturday night. Take your family to the movies, matinee to get a discount, and go out for the night. So it's fun.
Okay, well that's good. I mean, I'm glad to hear that. Let's use that as a preface to talk about Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, because is that something that you went into expecting more than just a popcorn movie, or is that something that so how did you feel about that? What kind of expectations do you have for that movie versus a movie like Black Adam that is also a superhero movie, but doesn't have the all of the MCU stuff to back, to have behind it, and then the previous Black Panther behind it, like this movie did?
That's a very interesting way to talk about this movie. I feel engaged talking about it through that subject parameter. Well, the history is, of course, it's the only Marvel film to be nominated for Best Picture. It won an Oscar for Best Costume. It was nominated for like 9 Oscars, deservedly so. It's one of the best, if not the best, Marvel movie. Hyperbolic as I am, I hate to say things like that, but I don't know if I don't know about my expectation levels going into films. I just feel like I'm a blank slate every time. I just do. Now that I know that's impossible, and I know that's hard to say, but I assume I'm gonna really like it or really enjoy it, or I'm assuming, maybe assuming assumption versus expectation is a better, because expectation sounds like I'm putting something on the film to impress me with. An assumption is that I assume it's going to be interestingly deep and darker, probably because of the subject matter with T'Challa dying, and no big spoiler, everybody knows that, and how they were going to handle that. And Namor, the Submariner, which they never call him that once in the movie. If they do, I didn't hear it. Is one of my favorite Marvel characters. Yeah. How'd you feel?
I went into it with a certain amount of expectation, but I knew it was going to be a steep hill to climb for them, for the writers of the film. And on top of that, like, I think that as the MCU moves on, as we moved into whatever phase 84 or whatever phase we're in right now, is that you keep having to build more and more onto this thing, and it can get out of hand, and there's so many different elements that they have to build in to the plot of the movie. And it's going to be the same thing for Ant-Man Quantumania, and it's going to be the same. I mean, every movie from now on in the MCU, you're going to have the surface story of the film, but then you're also going to have the building of each of those things. It feels like the Thor movie was maybe the Thor Love and Thunder, and maybe the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are going to be less tied to that, maybe. But from what I've heard, the small things I've heard about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, there's still a big element in that's going to play into the Secret Wars movies and all this stuff that's coming down the line. But either way, I knew that there was all these boxes they were going to have to check. And then now we're in this situation where they got to check the boxes. So that was, and I think I'm probably talked about a little bit in a previous podcast, but I felt like all of that in place, the way that they handled T'Challa's death in the film was well done, and how they moved forward with the film. I felt like they were hamstrung with having to introduce the Ironheart character, who's a cool character, and I think, can fit in a certain way, but it seemed like instead of the story being propelled forward, it seemed like it was something that had to be drug along. Like the story had to be drug along behind the characters, instead of the characters propelling what they're doing on screen, propelling the story forward. So that was the worst part about it for me. But to me, I thought it was really interesting what they did with Namor. I don't have a history with Namor, and I think you're right. I don't think they ever called him the Submariner. But the fact that they're using the Mesoamerican iconography and Aztec type things to represent the Atlanteans, and to give them somewhat of a backstory and a lived-in character, I think that really helped to meet you where Namor is, instead of Namor just like popping up out of nowhere and being like, this is my society, this is what's happened to us, and not really understanding, not really having a backstory for that. So I thought that was very well done. But and then the CGI is really well done, and they're getting to the point now where that's all just kind of a given. And even though they have less and less money and less time to complete it, I think that the tools have gotten to the point where they don't need as much time and they don't need as much money to have an Infinity War equivalent type of CGI that doesn't take you out of the film, but is still servicing what's going on screen, and isn't shocking when you see certain things. The physics of a lot of that stuff is kind of worked out. So every once in a while, one thing I did notice is that like Namor, when he's kind of bouncing around, it looks unnatural if it's like somebody flying around. But when you think about it as someone like stepping on something and then pushing off, that's kind of like what he's doing in midair, but he's using his foot wings. I don't know what we're calling them. He's I'm not trying to be a jerk about it, but they're foot wings. So he's using his foot wings, and I could see, being able to have those foot wings make you move in the way that he moves.
Winged feet.
Foot wings,
Winged feet.
Got it. Okay. It sounds so much more classy. Just like it's got that touch of class when you say winged feet.
Versus the way you're saying it?
Sure.
Yes, it does, actually. It does.
You're right.
I agree with everything that you say. I think you're right. They have to add these characters. That's fine. I think they were thrown a lot of wrenches, obviously, and it must have been really tough on so many different levels. The commitment, the obligation, the respect, the dignity to Chadwick Boseman as a person, as an actor, as T'Challa, as a character, as a force of nature in that film and in our lives. So that must have been difficult. Then you have to say, let's slow down then. But they couldn't, because it's a juggernaut and everything is moving now. And there is mechanical parts that we can't possibly understand, and money and budgets and actors and hires and contracts and all that stuff that I can't possibly gather into my consciousness to understand how something like that works. That said, if you take a 8, 9, or 10-year-old to this movie, I'm wondering how they would feel about it versus what it was like to see the first original Black Panther. And on that premise alone, I think this one falls way short.
Yeah.
I have mad deep respect for everybody involved in this film. I think everybody does some top-notch work. I think Angela Bassett is always proven one of our finest actors on actors on film, and she does it again. And the movie is Shuri's film, which it should be, and she holds her own. Lupita Nyong'o is just not used enough, and I don't know how you would go about doing it better. It just feels like they wove together quite a few different things that they weren't expecting to have to weave together. And that's unfortunate, because in the long run, it seems like a very long running time, which it is, but it feels like that too. And usually I can get lost, in the foot wings and that kind of stuff. And I would venture to say there are other things that I am not qualified to have a critical eye about, but I do have a feeling about. So I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing Ruth Carter in particular, but I was telling you post podcast last week that I thought that Namor was overly designed. I thought that, and I love the Aztec thing, and because that's supposedly the Aztec culture fell into the ocean. That's a legend. That's like a thing. And so that makes sense that they played into that. And I love all that design. And, when he is taking the Jaws throne, that's excellent. That's all like the way it should be and the way you should see it. But then when he comes out of the water and he's just Namor, there is so much going on that should be so simplified that it distracted me. The nose ring is a big ass bone. It's like huge. And okay, bring it in a little bit. And those big things on his ears. And then not only that, but then they have these big things poking out of him. So every time he moves, his profile is odd. And then always wearing the neck thing and always wearing the wrist things. And my friend's son, Carter, said, well, he's literally wearing a gold belt and green bikini bottoms in the comic book. I go, exactly. And he goes, how do you do that in a modern day movie? I was like, well, it seems like they couldn't figure that out. So they added all this stuff to him, which 10 years from now might be exactly what I love about it. But for right now, it was just, and the Ironheart Power Ranger looking thing. And I went and I looked her up afterwards because I wanted to find out about her. And she's designed similar, but they got lost in it. It's huge. It's like bubbly, and it's very like, they took the Flash's costume and they injected air into the red Solo cups, and it became this huge thing. And it was unusually distracting. And so I've only seen it once, and I'll see it again. I might have a completely different opinion. But for me, I just walked out of it going, my first thought was, I don't know how they would have done it.
Mm-hmm.
How to pull this off.
Nope, me either.
And so I just leave it at that.
Yeah, and that's where, Ryan Coogler and his other co-writers, it's like you're right, they're given, and it's kind of like at a late stage, they're given a really tough assignment. And so just the fact that, the other thing you got to think about is that, like, I don't know if Ryan Coogler looks at that as like, they're going to make another Black Panther movie. Like, I can either be a part of it or I can not be a part of it. So then at that point you start to try to figure out.
Contractually be part of it.
Well, you could, yeah, I would think you could always leave for whatever reasons, but, yeah, there's ways to get out. There's ways to get out of contracts.
It's pretty tough though. It's pretty tough when you're talking about financial stuff.
Yeah.
So
either way, I think that was, they did what they could, I think, as far as the writing was concerned. Letitia Wright, I am interested to see what she's going to do. And I've seen her in a good few things. I know she had like a small part in Death on the Nile. And I saw her in that. She's in a great Black Mirror episode. And so, I mean, she's in one of Steve McQueen's Small Axe movies. Or, I mean, it's a mini series, but it's a mini series of movies. So, I would consider that a movie. So, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what she does going forward. So I'm going to use this time now to do a little bit of housekeeping. Last episode, we talked about Tar, and I kept saying composer instead of conductor when talking about Tar. And I did it all the time. There was every once in a while I would say it correctly where she's actually a conductor and not a composer. But I was using them interchangeably in the podcast, and it really grated on me. And I'm very sorry to all composers and conductors, some of which I'm sure are both. But there's obviously a difference between a composer and a conductor, and Lydia Tarr in the movie was a conductor. So I'm done.
I love that you did that. But I will give you this rationalization. That movie is a tough movie. And you dug deep, and I dug deep. We went to levels that Todd Field wanted us to go to. And we took some staircases to places I'm not sure he was like, there's the door, you figure that out, So when you're having a conversation about a film like that,
yeah,
it's like talking about a painting or a sculpture. You can use words, but really, can you? It's about feelings. So I will absolve you of all.
Well, thank you.
Because, me and words are not the best of friends all the time. So your passion speaks louder than your misspoken choices of words.
I hope so. Well, I hope so. Yeah. And, I have listened to some interviews with him and with Cate Blanchett since we did the podcast. And he's definitely one of those people, one of those creators who spins the top and just lets it go. And is like, it's on you now. Like, I'm not gonna tell you anything. We're not making any specific judgments on any of this stuff. Like, it goes out into the world, and now you have to deal with it as an audience member, and as fellow audience members, grappling about it. It is it's a definite, parking lot movie where you walk out of the theater and you cannot help but talk to whoever you watch the movie with about that movie. So yeah, it's great.
Well, since you made a transition from Black Adam, Black Panther to Tar, I'm going to take it one step further. You mentioned to me that
oil.
You saw...
We're doing oil next.
You're so silly. Sometimes I wonder how your brain works. I can't. After 8 years, I still can't figure out. I'm not ready. I'm not improv ready for you. But it'd be fun to see you in improv class because people would be like, "What?" And then you'd have to give them an encyclopedia reference of footnotes.
That's the worst improv. That is the worst improv. No, let me explain to you why this is funny. Give me 5 minutes.
But that's why it's funny. Because you're the guy who would explain everything. That's a Saturday Night Live skit waiting to happen. Only because you're insecure about stuff like that, or you feel like not secure about stuff like that. Anyway, so transition into as tough of a film as Tar, in my opinion, but did not involved my gray matter as deeply as it tar did Blonde. You saw Blonde.
I did.
I need to know some initial thoughts on it. You don't have to go deep.
Well,
But
so I've thought about it a lot. So I love Andrew Dominic. I knew I was going to see it. And we did touch on it when we talked about, you watching it, but we turned on our Netflix again. I watched Blonde, and it took up a good chunk of an afternoon for me. And so that was a little bit rough. So he's such a great craftsman. Like his command of the moving image is actually it's very well in hand. I think he knows what he wants to see and what he wants to show you, as far as what's on screen. But my issues with the movie were all in the motivation of the film and the tough position that Ana de Armas was put in, and any actress in that position would have been put in. I think you're right. You said that she was, a tour de force there, that she was amazing in the film as far as like what she was asked to do and what she did. And I think, and you also said that that this performance was like your quintessential or your favorite portrayal of Marilyn Monroe on film. And I think that she is able to inhabit a character on the screen, a consistent character on the screen, but that character on the screen is so boiled down and so basic. I can't imagine an actual human being that. And that's the problem. I was listening to a podcast, the Bill Simmons podcast, which he's like the head of the Ringer Network, and they do the Big Picture podcast, and they do all this, and it's great. Bill Simmons has set up a great stable of people to dig into sports and pop culture. But he had Wesley Morris on, who's a contributing writer to the New York Times, and he does New Yorker articles, and he has a podcast for the New York Times, and Still Processing, I think is what it's called. So, and I don't know if they're on a hiatus or what right now, but they had him on, and he was talking about a different movie. He was talking about Till, which I have not seen yet, about Emmett Till, essentially about the post Emmett Till's murder and what Emmett Till's mother had to go through, and the decisions that she had to make after his murder. And this is a quote from him. He said, "I think the movie has no core." Now he's talking about Till. I think of this, when he said this, I immediately went to Blonde for me. "I think the movie has no core. It's kind of dead in the middle. It requires this actor in the middle to give this very emotional performance, and all she is required to do is inhabit pain and suffering and not really deal with the underlying state of what it is like to be this person in this moment." So that kind of summed it up for me. It's just, you're watching someone be in pain for 3 hours. And I'm not saying that like we need to shy away from showing people in pain so that we can commiserate with them, or so that we can understand that that I've had a pretty good life, or whatever, that's whether it's to differentiate yourself from the person that's on screen, or whether it's for you to be able to commiserate remotely with that character. This is not that. This is just, it's voyeurism at a certain extent. And so that's the part that really, it was tough for me. I mean, I got through it, but just so that I could say that I watched the whole film and could evaluate the whole film. Cause it was like, well, maybe it's gonna, whatever, maybe it's gonna evolve. Maybe it's gonna turn around. Maybe it's gonna be something else, but it's never something else. It's always the same thing. So
yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think I said similar things, maybe not exactly the same. What I said about Ana de Armas is that she looks the most like Marilyn Monroe on film.
She does.
She It's uncanny. Although it would have been nice to see her a bit more voluptuous. Is that a
Well,
politically correct term? Because
her
I don't
body type's different than Marilyn Monroe's body type.
totally,
Yeah.
but so is Jake LaMotta's, and so
Oh, I
is.
see what you're saying.
I'm
Yeah.
just saying, I, that's fine that they didn't. It was not distracting, but I think it does a disservice on some levels to true body image and the fact that somebody who was as revered and considered, the quintessential beauty of the time was a woman who was not a size 2. And I think that needs to be represented. Now, granted, this is not a documentary about Marilyn Monroe. It is a filmmaker's idea, whatever that idea may be. And I think you're exactly right. What's the filmmaker's name?
Andrew Dominic.
The shot of DiMaggio in the crowd with all the flash bulbs, and the skirt goes up and you barely see him in the crowd when the camera goes back and back, and then all of a sudden you see him and he is not happy.
Yeah.
And that apparently did happen. So I will say this. I saw that documentary on Netflix about Marilyn Monroe right after Blonde, and two things. That thing did really happen. He was not happy about that skirt. I don't know if he was in the crowd at the moment, but he was not happy about that. But I'm like, that's weird. Men trying to control women that they fell in love with because of things, and now they want it to be changed because they don't want it to be anything but what they want it to be. It's like, what? That's a whole interesting film in amongst itself. That said, if you go back and watch that documentary, she is very weepy. She is very teary, and that thing that Ana de Armas does in the film, Marilyn Monroe did do that, and she does it quite a bit in quite a few interviews and quite a few home footage. And so I was like, okay, well, they keyed into that, but you're exactly right. It's 3 hours of pain. You need to give us a reason why somebody would stay in it. You need to give us a reason why. You gave us the psychological reasons why somebody would be forced into it, but not stay in it. And maybe it could be 1,000 different things. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm not saying especially not saying Marilyn Monroe is to blame because she stayed. That's not the point. The point is that people stay for a reason, and it might be because they don't know any better. It might be because they were so abused that this is natural to them. It might be 1,000 different reasons. Tina Turner has stated over and over again, well, not over and over again, I've heard her state it before, that she knew Ike would get her to a certain place. Did she know she was going to have to pay the price like that? No, she did not. And it took her years of systematic abuse from him and from her life to finally wake up to not wanting to be there anymore and realizing she really is the person who's doing all of this and that she needs to fly and be free. Maybe that's not the point of this filmmaker's film, but they never tap into any of that stuff. So
exactly.
I'm hoping that people who are interested in Marilyn Monroe do not only explore this film. This plus other things is good because there's something about her and just go see her movies.
Exactly.
That's what I would say.
So I was going to try to end on a positive note and say that like the recreations of a lot of the movie portions of the scenes like are so well done, and there's such attention to detail, and you can tell that the filmmakers were really keyed in on paying homage and specifically honoring the films that they chose. I mean, I had just watched Niagara a couple months ago, and there were some scenes from Niagara in there, and like it looks so much the same. It's uncanny. So I did kind of enjoy those little things like that, but yeah, like I said, ultimately it gets gutted by the all of the shortcomings of the film. So that's tough.
Okay.
I want him to make another film, and I want it to be I want it to not have as much baggage as this has, and I just want to see what he's capable of. And yeah.
I will say this: if he was teaching a class, like a 3-hour class on why he made that film, I would go and listen to it. I would try to hear what his thoughts were. So I'm going to take the wheel for just a little bit more on the podcast and direct us a certain place, because I'm dying to tell you that, well, I texted it to you that I saw Don't Worry, Darling.
Yes.
And okay. So, it's so much better than they say it is, and the whole muckety muck around it is ridiculous that it pulled my attention away, and I'm mad at myself that I was kind of like, well, I'm mad at that movie. Oh, this drama. Ugh. Somewhere that was planted.
Mm.
And then when I started watching it, I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. Clear slate, blank slate. Florence Pugh is amazing. Olivia Wilde is really on point.
Mm.
Chris Pine is really on point. All three of them, top notch. She should be extremely proud that those are the characters that she wrote, and the actors got those characters out of her descriptions. Harry Styles, poor guy. He's just not as bad as everybody says he is. He's just not. He has not developed, or does not have. I am not to say it, whatever it is on film, he has not shown it to me yet. Mm-hmm. But if that was me, I would not be embarrassed. I'd be like, okay, that beat was good. That beat was good. Dance Like a Monkey. That was good. There were certain things that he was really good at. When it came down to the emotional integrity and the strength or lack of strength that character needed, in particular in that car scene where he has his breakdown scene, I would have cut the scene. Because it seems like an acting exercise. It doesn't seem like an actor who's entrenched in the character in that moment. And it's a very Magnolia moment too, from Tom Cruise in the car. And I'm like, okay, pull away. We get it. Pull away. He just doesn't have the depth yet, but he's not bad. He's not horrible. And people who are giving him a hard time about his accent, he's British. What's the problem? Were they thinking he was supposed to be American? Is that what the problem was? There's a
I
big
haven't heard any of that.
Oh my gosh, It's a big thing. His accent on Twitter.
Huh.
Film Twitter is brutal. And they also speak on things before they actually, in general, from my opinion, from what I've seen, they speak on things before they've actually seen them, which is, always a great way to do it. But overall, I thought the concept of the film was excellent. The twist is excellent. It comes too late. There's not enough exploration of the twist. And there are so many questions after the movie that I went, those questions that I'm posing should be the film. Somebody posed actually, my friend's kid again, his wife, said that the twist should have happened in the first 5 minutes, and we could have gone back and forth to the worlds, if you will. And I went, well, I don't know about that, but I see what you're saying, because they wanted to know the motivation of Chris Pine's wife, which I can't remember her name from the Eternals.
Jimmy Chan.
Yeah, I like her. She's so beautiful. Mm-hmm. She's striking on film. As soon as you see her, you're like, okay, look, let's pay attention. That sounded weird. You know what I'm saying, though, objectively speaking. And how the development of the world happened, all that stuff is, I was posing, which I think is what Olivia Wilde wanted to happen. She wanted you to ask the questions after the film. And until the end of the film, I could not figure out why Shia LaBeouf was the one they wanted for this part. I was like, I don't get it. I can't see him. And then when it happens and you figure out who Harry Styles really is, I was like, oh, I could totally see Shia LaBeouf doing what he did. I could totally see Shia LaBeouf. But there's so many questions, without giving too many spoilers away, that you and I could talk about later on. But overall, I thought it deserved better than it got. I thought the reception should have been better than it was.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I think that there's definitely more meat on that bone than everybody seems to think. They think it's just a vapid exercise in playing dress up, but it's not. There's things that you can dig into there, and there's great performances, like you said. So I think that it may be one of those things where, separate from all of the weird Harry Styles, Olivia Wilde, all of that stuff, separate from all of that stuff, if you revisit it, or if people come to it in the future, then there may be a way to recontextualize the film. But I think you're right. It's still going to be lacking certain very important elements.
There are questions that I have.
The end is like you're right. That like downhill section of the film where we start picking up steam and then moving towards this reveal. And then as they get to the end of the movie, it's not satisfying. It's too, like, I do like the world building, and I love any movie that goes into these types of, world building things. And, whether it's like retro sci-fi, whatever thing you're feeling, that's a that's I like being in that feeling. But then if it doesn't have a satisfying payoff, you kind of feel cheated. You kind of feel like you took advantage of me as a film goer. You took advantage of me as an audience member.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's her obligation to.
Sure,
Um,
that's fine.
she poses questions, and then she answers some questions. My personal opinion is that she should have answered more questions, taken more length at the end. Letting me down or not satisfying me, which totally I just heard. But
What?
in context of this conversation about this film,
Yeah.
it does feel like a letdown, but not because it's not executed well, but because there's too many questions at the end of the film that I wanted answered, and maybe she didn't care about. And I'll say two last things about it. First, my boss saw it without any knowledge about anything, about Harry Styles, the spitting thing, any of the above, right? Did you hear about that?
Yes.
Okay, right. So, I mean, why are we not so much more interested in figuring out the answers to this film? But we spent a week on that.
If we could engage the public in like figuring out nuclear fission, and get the same energy that they spent trying to go like frame by frame and figuring out if Harry Styles spit on Chris Pine, we would have nuclear fission figured out. But
peace on earth, dude.
yeah,
it would solve the world problems. But anyway, we're also talking about the people we're talking about. So it's a weird conundrum. And okay, so she had no idea, and she was enthralled by it, and she loved it. She did feel like I did say the same thing about the ending. I thought there was too many questions. She was like, yeah, I did have a lot of questions. I would like to see a part 2, which answers the question that she did have thoughts that were unsatisfied. That said, the other thing is that Olivia Wilde, with the world building phrase that you used, she got lost in that decade, or that idea of that decade. And because the production design is like Tim Burton meets Stepford Wives meets Olivia Wilde's new vision of the 50s, or whatever you want to call that decade. She got lost in it. It's such a interesting looking time frame that was not what the film was about, and I think she got lost in it. But texturally speaking, watching it is a visual feast. And I think we need to get off her back and give her more money and let her make her third film, because if this is the sophomore slump, if this was somebody's first film, people would be like, wow. But because of the history, and because she's an actress, and because she's female, and because she made such a great first film, people were like, well,
not as good as that one. Yeah, no,
but that's okay.
Yeah,
but that's okay. She's a voice to be reckoned with. Period.
Yeah, no, I'm sure she'll find another project, and we'll get to watch it. So I need for you to watch Park Chan-wook's new film, Decision to Leave. I watched it. I am a huge fan of Park Chan-wook, and it was the wrong night for me. I just think it was the wrong night. I did not. It wasn't. I don't know. I was confused. I can tell that the film was done very. It's got a master's hand on it, but I got lost in the plot. I got lost in the motivations. I got lost in the character choices, and it made the whole feeling of the film for me confusing. And so I was not able to see it again. I watched that movie, and then 2 days later we left out of town, and then we were gone for a couple weeks, and so and then by the time I came back, it was not in the theaters anymore. So I think it's coming out on some sort of streaming service, but I need to watch it again because I'm missing something. I know I'm missing something because I was on Mubi, if you have that service. I don't have that service, but yeah. So it's kind of like a detective. It's you could say it might be like a maybe femme fatale, maybe at least female. A woman is potentially accused of a crime. Then there's a detective looking into the crime, and then they get intertwined in a certain way, and so it seems like it would have a lot of potential. But then I've found myself, I guess it was like I'm not looking at the right spot. It's like I'm like the ball's over here and I'm looking over there. It's like I'm not looking at the right thing. So I could definitely tell that there were certain, like he does a lot of the things that like David Fincher does, where there's CGI all over the place and you'll never notice it because of the way that he moves the camera or the way that he positions the camera. He will Park Chan will position a camera in an impossible place in the context of the physical space that the characters are in. The camera should not be able to be there, but it is. And the reason why is because of CGI. It's because they're able to cover over all of the messiness of physically putting a camera in a certain position. So that's the stuff that I did key into and I really was interested about. But once we got to the end of the film, I was kind of like, I don't know why I don't feel anything. So that was tough for me, because I really was, especially coming off of seeing The Handmaiden, which is, I mean, it's one of his greatest movies that he's made. And I'm still impressed about that. You didn't get a chance to see that, did you?
Okay. Not yet. I was just looking up his bio going, oh, damn it. It's that guy.
It's that guy. We talked about him. Yeah, we talked about him.
Guy.
And he's done so many different amazing films.
Stoker, right? Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All those
Old Boy. Yeah.
Yep.
Which is brilliant.
Yep. Yeah.
Brilliant.
No, it's great. And I'm not expecting an Old Boy. Like I'm not expecting. It doesn't have to be like a super gimmicky film or anything like that. It doesn't have to have the third act reveal. It doesn't have to have any of that stuff. I would be satisfied with, with something that is a little bit, more nuanced. And to me, it seems like I'm just missing something. So yeah. I don't know.
It's got a great score on Metacritic, that's for sure. And then I always go to the most negative review. Needlessly complicit and at times almost impossible to follow.
Oh, there you go. Well, it's not
non-linear storyteller telling. I'm not reading that.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't give anything away, but
no, I usually don't do that. I just was like trying to. I only do that after I've seen a film or we've talked about it. Meaning seen the film and we talk about it and I'm still having, like I did that before Tar, which I never do.
See,
I just don't have the right language to speak about Tar, the right vernacular to speak about Tar other than my feelings. So I was trying to cling on to maybe something somebody else said that I could say, oh, well, yeah, this is how I'm feeling, but they articulated it better than I did. So when you were talking, I was thinking, well, maybe that somebody's feeling the same way. And, then obviously they were.
Well, speaking
not
of Tar,
most of them.
Well, I know, but a few people, I'm sure. There's always somebody. Speaking of Tar, that's kind of my problem is for myself, is that 2 days before I saw Decision to Leave, I watched Tar, a 3-hour-long movie, or like 2.5-hour-long movie at 10 o'clock at night, and was perfectly fine. And I just drank it all in. And then 2 days later, I go and see Decision to Leave at 9:30 p.m. And I'm like trying to follow, trying to keep it in. And so partially that's my fault. I'm not like, it's not like middle of the day, I've had my coffee and I'm like digging in. It's not that, but at the same time, like I didn't have a problem with Tar and I did have a problem with this one. And I'm not trying to directly compare the two. I'm just saying that like, that's how they both hit me on those particular nights. And so I have to figure it out from going forward. So I got to give it another chance.
Well, that's interesting. That's why we're not critics, because critics never admit to the non-objective opinions or the subjective opinions, if you will, because you were tired or you were on a plane or you were jet lagged and then you saw this movie and then you wrote a review. You should say that first.
Hmm.
This didn't affect me, especially if it, but that said, if your history was one of a person who does that, then I would be like, well, maybe you need to go back and drink some coffee in the middle of the afternoon. But your history has dictated that that doesn't happen to you. A film will light us up and wake us up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I saw Drive My Car at like 9:30 on like a Tuesday night and had to be at work the next day. And I was like, I'm going to be late because I'm going to not get enough sleep tonight. So I don't know this film, and I will probably watch it now that you now, because I have a different angle now coming into it. Not that I wouldn't be interested in it anyway. I'm just saying that it will be interesting to hear or to watch it, and then my observations based on what you were talking about, not based on what you were talking about, but compared or spoken about with each other.
So how was Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio?
It's pretty unique. It's unique. It's beautiful to look at. The animation is stunning. The design is stunning. He has a vision, and he has some obsessions. I've just now realized through this film that and I didn't really put it all together. See, when you see one film after the next, and then you see something up to date, you go, oh, he has a thing about the Second World War. Oh, he has a thing about Nazis. Not that other filmmakers don't. He has a thing about production-wise, production design and costumes and character-wise, things with eyeballs on them, right? So if you were watching this film and had no idea whose film it was, you would think it was a European Tim Burton. That's what it, somebody with a non-American sensibility. Not that one is better than the other, just sometimes people from different places have different sensibilities because of their different cultural influences and so forth and so on. But as soon as you get to the Blue Fairy, you're like, Del Toro. There's no doubt about it. I don't know the book as well. I sort of know the book only because I looked it up. I, of course, know the Disney cartoon, and Robert Zemeckis just remade it too. So there's another one coming out with Tom Hanks. And so it's really interesting. I just felt like I was on a Saturday matinee. It was raining today. I saw it today. So it was a matinee, but and it is technically my day off. So it's sort of like a Saturday, and sort of just, you just happen upon a movie, and you just go to the movie theater and you're just like, I'm going to go see Pinocchio. Why not? And you have no idea about the director, the designer, the production designer, nothing. You don't know anything about that. You're just going to watch Once Upon a Time. And he fulfills that niche. Once upon a time, here's this story about this wooden boy named Pinocchio. He does take it into places I would have never expected. There's some religious connotation, it's not even connotation, religious imagery that is interestingly used. And he makes an interesting point about some statues that exist in religious cultures. And if you had said Mussolini, Nazis saluting Hitler, and Nazi youth camps, Pinocchio, I would have been, what? But it's all there.
Wow.
And that may be, I can't wait to see it again because it's so luscious and so well designed and so interesting. And the voices are great. Ewan McGregor, Ron Perlman. There's quite a few great people in it. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Guillermo del Toro. Yeah. Ron Perlman's in it.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Duh. Because, yes, because it's Ron Perlman and, Sons of Anarchy, Clay. There's a reason he's in all of his movies. And this was before Del Toro was Del Toro, and Ron Perlman was a working actor.
Yeah.
Before he was everything that he is now. And I'm still not sure people know Ron Perlman's name by name, but anyway, they should. So the voiceover or the voice acting is great. The cinematography is beautiful. The film looks amazing. I can't stress that enough. But there's probably maybe 10 too many themes. There's a ton of stuff in that film. There's a lot.
Is
There's
it a kids movie?
I said to my 13-year-old nephew, I wish I had waited and saw this movie with you. He is a big anime fan. He is still, he likes Disney, although he wouldn't probably admit that, but he is still a animated person, animated film watcher. And he's watching some new vampire show on Netflix that he wants me to watch that's animated. It looks kind of cool, actually. And I said, I wish I would have taken you to see what you thought of it. And then I thought to myself, if he was 8, 7, 6, he might have been scared of it because it is very dark. And it's like Pan's Labyrinth. You think it's one thing, and then it turns into another thing. And then they're Nazis again. And then, not to make light of it, but, it's a thing with Del Toro. And as a younger child, I think I would have been too overwhelmed by it. It would have been too perplexing, and I would have been scared of it because of not understanding the themes and not being able to take in what he was trying to say. So is it a child's movie? If you have a very mature child,
okay,
over the age of 10.
Got it. Okay.
Well, I mean, I just don't think it's not like the Robert Zemeckis Disney, or the Disney version.
But then also look at the Disney animated version. I mean, the donkey scenes where the kids are turned into donkeys in the Pleasure Island, like that is some creepy stuff.
Well, the Dumbo sequence when he hallucinates or whatever he drinks in that bucket.
That's creepy stuff too.
And Fantasia, is that it? Fantasia? That's creepy too. I hate that broom that walks with the broom legs. I hate that thing. That thing's scary. It has no face. It's wrong. It's wrong. I don't like it. Well, so Disney has not shied away from Ursula from Little Mermaid is not exactly, it's ironic because in the Hunchback of Notre Dame, is it Ares who's what's his name?
It.
Yeah, he's got a big flame head, and I think it's anyway, he's one of the scariest Greek myths out there, and he seems kind of buffoonish in the animated version. So you never know with Disney. So yeah, there is that.
So I saw a few movies for the first time. I saw Willow for the first time in preparation for the Willow show.
Okay.
And actually it was much better than I thought it would be. I've heard it's like just kind of a crappy, B type movie, but it had some really good effects in it. It had some stop motion animation, like Ray Harryhausen type effects, but then it also had this like morphing technology in 1988, which like wasn't like, I don't know if they did it with a computer or what, but like it looked really good, like seriously good for what it was. I mean, and there's a lot of stuff that, there's miniature, there's like, smaller, like miniature people that are smaller than Willow and smaller than Mad Mardigan or whatever his name is. And played by Kevin Pollak and Rick Overton. And those guys, you could tell like the edges on them weren't that great. You could tell it was a blue screen. You could tell it was optically done. And it's, it's not the way that we do it nowadays with all the Avengers movies and stuff. But it didn't detract from the storytelling. And I thought that was really cool. And I'm excited to see the Willow series. I also saw Repo Man. And I know you said that you enjoyed that film. And it's the first Alex Cox film that I've seen, and I know he's made other films, but yeah, it's really good, and it's dirty and raw, and it is definitely like a punk aesthetic of filmmaking, which I loved, and I loved the mixing of genres to a certain extent, and not shying away from just going for it. Like that's what I thought was really great, is that it's an off the wall story and they just go for it. And I love that. That's confidence. I love confident filmmakers, and Alex Cox is definitely one of them. Good performances, Harry Dean Stanton, Emilio Estevez on down the line. It was a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed it.
That was one of those movies that was a midnight movie at the Narrow, which is the theater in Norfolk, the old vaudeville theater. That one's the Bird in Richmond's the old vaudeville. I think the Narrow's always been a movie theater, but it's been there since forever. And we would go see that and a couple of other films on a regular basis. The Hunger, that's where I saw Hunger. Huh. Yeah. And I love two parts of that film to this day. Just they come to me, and in the supermarket, people must think I'm crazy because if I see anything that says food or drink, not necessarily generic food, this is good food, Mom. This is good food. To me, I can't stop laughing once I start thinking of that. God forbid I'm in like a class or something or have to be quiet if that comes to my mind, because to this day, I still laugh about that. And then when she goes, people just blow up. I love that. So yeah, it's part of my upbringing. It's part of my coming of age movies, and it's a strange film in so many ways.
But they tell you that from the beginning, which I really appreciate. Like that first scene, guy gets pulled over, boom, let's go.
Yeah,
get it. Yeah,
absolutely. But now that I think about it, no wonder I'm a little twisted. I mean, you were talking about Quadrophenia, the Who's movie, Repo Man. David Lynch's Eraserhead.
Labyrinth.
Labyrinth was in there too. Yeah. Pink Floyd's The Wall. The Hunger. These were all the midnight movies I would go and see. This is what my friends and I would do on Friday or Saturday night instead of whatever people at 14, 15, 16 did. We went to the Narrow and saw these late night movies. Yeah.
That's cool. That's really cool. So another movie that I saw, this is the last one I'll talk about, is Ty West's X, and I need to like there's been a bunch of horror movies, and I'm not like a horror movie completionist. Like I don't do the whole like I'm gonna see every horror movie that came out this year, but there's a handful of them that I get a feeling about, and X was one of them, and I'm glad I saw it, and it's really well done. It's not like Scream where it's so self-referential to the genre, but it differentiates itself from those kind of like parody within the genre type horror movies, and so it's got great performances by actually there's a couple of the main person in the film. She is Mia Goth, who we saw in Suspiria, and we've seen you've seen her in other films, but she's kind of a magnetic presence in the film, and it's got a lot of like good payoff deaths, and it ticks all the boxes of a horror movie, but then at the same time it adds another extra little layer to it by being this like the plot is it's like a bunch of young people are going to shoot a porno in this like farm, and then they're renting an external like farmhouse on this big farmland, and then so of course the people who own the farm start picking them off one by one. It's not a spoiler, but it's just that's how the movie starts, and that's how it develops, but it adds another layer onto all of that makes it even more complex, and it adds a level of intrigue to the film. And there's definitely some gross out parts, and they may not all be murder related, so it's parse that sentence. So yeah, no, it's very well done. And then there's also a movie that I guess while they were making this movie, it was like right around COVID times, so they made a whole nother movie. Ty West made a whole nother movie with Mia Goth that is tangentially related to one of the characters in the film. So then that movie's called Pearl. I have not seen that movie, but so I don't know, it was kind of a cool little entree into horror. There's another one I need to see, Barbarian. I know everybody's been talking about it, that but that's another one that has like some sort of a turn or some sort of a gimmick to it that I don't want to know anything about. So I purposely am not seeking out any information on it. I'll just find it when I think it's on HBO Max right now. But so yeah. Lastly, I had a couple things. Of these 3 movies, which one are you the most excited to watch? The Fablemans, that's Steven Spielberg's film. Bones and All, that's Luca Guadagnino's film. And Babylon, Damien Chazelle's film.
Initial instinct, Babylon.
Okay.
Just because I need to see what Tobey Maguire's doing.
He's
calling
creepy.
me. He's calling me.
He does though, because like remember,
he's calling me.
Yeah, it's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That character that he plays. I
don't remember that.
It was he plays a hitchhiker, and he with like stringy like blonde hair.
That's Tobey Maguire.
That's Tobey Maguire.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so he definitely has played some outlandish characters before, so I don't really know what his character is in Babylon, but
something about him. He's only in a couple snippets here and there in the trailer. Like he's got one. I saw one today where he's doing a weird laugh, and so something about him. Something about him, and also, I mean, everything about that film calls to me. Gene Smart, Damien Chazelle, Brad Pitt. I mean, there's
Margot Robbie looks unhinged in that
Have
movie.
you seen that new trailer where I'll do my makeup myself, and then she comes?
Stop watching trailers. Stop watching trailers on it. It's enough. I'm going.
I just happened to see it. So that would be initial, and then the other 2 were the Fablemans
and Bones and All. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about that movie.
Oh, I'll watch it. I think it's probably less cannibal-y and more like.
I heard it's not.
Romance.
I heard it's exactly what you're in fear of.
Really?
That's what I've heard. I've heard.
That's too bad.
I've heard like licking bones dry of blood.
But see, like
cannibal-y.
Suspiria did a good job.
Cannibal-y? Is that a word?
Cannibal-y, yeah.
Suspiria
did a good job, I think, of like being shocking, but then also not relying only on the shocks.
I heard flesh eating, bones licking blood.
Okay.
That's what I've heard.
Well, if you can get through the end of Suspiria, probably you could get through this.
Really? I didn't find it that bad. I
mean,
really?
It
was pretty, it's pretty, you're talking about all that? Yeah.
Yeah, at the end.
Yeah, it's pretty, yeah, okay. All right, that's a good way to put it.
There's a lot of red at the end of Suspiria without giving anything away.
Here's the thing. I did not know going into Suspiria what I was involved in. So I accepted it, and there's a long time from the beginning of the film till and all that stuff happens. So by that point, you're hooked, lined, and sinkered, and so you have no choice but to fulfill your destiny and finish the film because you respect these people, and I respect everybody involved with this film. You know me, I say it all the time. I have an instinct, and sometimes I have to follow that instinct because my suspension of disbelief is strong. And do I want to pull that into my universe right now? And the answer is no. And will I? Yes. Anytime soon, only if somebody's nominated for the Oscar.
Gotcha.
Because I just have to go slowly down my darkened way. I just know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, I'm going to accidentally bite the side of my lip during the film and have that iron taste in my mouth. Then you'll get the taste
for blood, and you're just going to have to go.
I'm not saying I'm going to be a cannibal-y kind of guy afterwards. I'm saying that there's a lot of boxes to tick in this film for me. I have to understand why, the main one being, why are you making this movie about this subject, and why am I watching it? You have to answer that question for me, Luca.
It better be an allegory, because otherwise we're wasting our time.
Meaning other than a factual.
Yeah, it needs to. I think there needs to be a reason why they chose. Why whatever. I don't know if it's based on a novel or what, but there needs to be a reason why they chose cannibalism as a grounding element of the story. So that there needs to be a parallel of some kind, I would hope. And he's pretty good at telling stories, so hopefully he's not just going crazy on wanting to chew on bones and humans. Last thing, Did you, since you're on film Twitter, I'm sure you heard about the Sight and Sound 2022 list?
Maybe.
Okay. So every 10 years, Sight and Sound is a British film magazine. They come out with a list of the 100 greatest films of all time.
Yes, and it's switched.
Yes, so that for whatever reason it started in like, I don't know, 1942, and so then every year, every 10 years from there, there's a new list. So this year, 2022, the list came out, and there's a lot of different positions that got moved around. A lot of different films got moved around to different positions. And the most notable thing that was at the top was number one, Jean Dielman, which is a film by Chantal Akerman. I have not seen it. I've heard about it. I have not seen it. I didn't know if you'd seen it. Okay. It does make me want to see it. So we'll say that right there. It makes me want to see it. The fact that it is number one on this list. There's been a lot of ink spilled on why it's either a good thing or a bad thing that this jumped this far to number one, and the things that were left off of the list and all that. Like, for example, Godfather 2 is not on the list of top 100 films. Now they have a couple lists. They have a director's list where they would go out and ask directors, what are your top 10 films? Well, give us a list of your top 10 films. They don't even ask them to rank them, which I think is right there an inherent issue with this list, is that, you would say, like, these are my top 10 films in no particular order. And I would say, these are my top 10 films in no particular order. And that's what all the critics did. They said, these are my top 10 films in no particular order. And then whichever ones get the most votes go to the top of the list. So with that criteria in mind, John Dielman was on more lists than any other movie. So that is how it got to the top of the list. So that means, in my estimation, that it's an important film. And so it makes me want to go out and see it. It supplanted Vertigo as number one. Everything kind of moved down a little bit. One thing I think was interesting, in the top 10, we've got In the Mood for Love is in there, which is awesome. Well, I don't want to say, of course, it wasn't in there, but
if you're talking about a list, then it needs to be there. Top 10 is fantastic.
Top 10 is fantastic.
And if that means that that's the films that people are going to explore because they haven't explored them before, then that's a reason to put it in the top 10 alone.
Exactly. Mulholland Drive is in there.
That's a tough one.
Another film from the last 20 something years. So yeah, that's in there too. I mean, it's rounded out by like Citizen Kane, Tokyo Story, Singing in the Rain, Man with a Movie Camera, which is an old, like, kind of silent film type movie, and Beau Travail. Have you seen Beau Travail or any Claire Denis stuff? That movie kind of got ruined for me, but yeah, Claire Denis has made some difficult films. She's still making films. She made High Life, I think, with Robert Pattinson recently. He's like in space, and is with, like, it's a kind of like a sci-fi but very grounded type of film. So yeah, this list I'm going to use to try to, like, figure out, like, films that I need to focus on a little bit more. For example, Tokyo Story, which I have not seen. That's Ozu, probably his most famous and popular film. So, and I think that's going to be kind of a difficult watch too. It's not a cheery film, but it's obviously on the top of a lot of people's lists. So yeah, I didn't know if you had any, like, I mean, lists for me are more of a, I want to go through and determine, like, I kind of like to see, like, how many have I seen, and then also, where do I need to prioritize, if I'm going to be, like, digging in, where do I need to prioritize? And I think this Sight and Sound film, along with the AFI lists and all that stuff, I'll use this as another thing.
I'm starting to believe that the only place in life to not make a list is about your top 10 films. No list. Grocery list, yes. To-do list, yes. Shopping list, yes. Top favorite restaurants that we visited in New York that we want to visit again, yes. Places we want to go in the country, places we've gone in the country, yes. maybe albums, maybe best tours, maybe best bands, maybe best live shows, maybe best live shows of a certain band, whatever it may be. But movie lists are starting to become, it's too subjective. It's too elusive to a person's opinion. And we're list oriented culture. We just are. And I think that's a great, healthy way to do it, in my personal, humbled opinion, that you're going to make this list kind of a reason to see these films because these have made it to this list's top 100. And that's a great way to see new films. And if that's what a list like this does, then I'm all about it. But I'm wondering, how do you do that? How do you make we've talked about this before when we did our top 10 list of all time. It's impossible. I mean, now that's changed. It at least for me, it's changed.
For me too.
So, I mean, it's just, I'm not saying it's bad that they do it. I think it's great. It's great fun. And I think it's a great educational tool, just like the Oscars, and seeing stuff that we might not have been exposed to, or people might not have been exposed to, that they might venture into, or somebody sees one of those person's films and go, I don't really understand that. But then they see another one and they go, oh, that's that same director. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I like that film much better. And it sparks a conversation, and that's great. But ranking films is so weird to me. It's just, I don't know. It's just, I always say, like younger, and when you're in the coming of age emo Hamlet phase, where everything's so dark and so gloomy and to be or not to be, and you're just like, oh, this existence, and you're so existential at 20, it's like the thought of not being here is a lot different than now for me. Not that I ever really had thoughts of not being here, but the reason why I'm telling you all that is because the reason to be here is to see whatever the next film is, to hear whatever the next song is, to hear what the next album would be, or the next poetry line, or the next book, or whatever, or the next conversation, or the next film that we watch together that we have a conversation about, or that next bonding moment with your wife over a film you never thought you would bond over with her about. That's a reason to continue on, because life can be really hard. And so if a list like this is going to promote somebody seeing In the Mood for Love and continues their existence in a way that's interesting and intriguing, maybe not positive. It doesn't necessarily have to be positive, because there's a lot of dark places in this world. So that's okay. Then that's a reason to do a list. But other than that, they seem, I don't know. Am I making sense? Like, they just seem, it's elusive, and well, your experience is different than mine. So what would make The Godfather 2 not better than The Godfather, or vice versa? What is the criteria? Just your opinion? It's tough.
Yeah. And I think for me, I would look at it, especially my top 10, is what if you have 30 seconds to tell somebody about the movies that you're telling them two different things. You're telling them about the movies that really light you up, and you're also telling them a little bit, a very small amount, in an obtuse way, about who you are. And so those are kind of like it's kind of a signpost of, this is what I believe is valuable. And this is what I believe is a representation of this form of art. And I think that was the other thing. And there's been, like I said, so much pontification on this over the last week or so. And the big thing that I kind of came away with was that when this list started in 1942 or whatever it was, film was kind of in its infancy, and access to film was a lot more difficult than it is now. So this is a vestige of an early art form. And I think now film is actually a very mature art form, to the point where it's probably not going to be the same 20 years from now or 30 years from now. It's just not going to be the same. It's been mature probably for the last 30, 40 years. But I think that we're going to get into a situation where our interaction with the moving picture and all of that is going to kind of change. And so I think that this is kind of an old timey way to do it's serving a different function now than it did before. That before it was like, you may have never even heard of this film, and you'll never ever hear of this film again. So if you have a quick ability to look at this list and be like, oh my gosh, that's going to be at this traveling roadshow theater, I need to go see it because this person said, or because these people over in England said it was a really good movie. That's a different thing than like, over half of these movies on the top 100 are on Criterion Channel right now. You can watch them all, one after the other. So really, I mean, it's not access that's the problem. So it's your attention that's the problem. So, yeah.
That's interesting. You attached a very clinical way to look at that almost. And I attached a very emotional way to look at it, because I'm also, I kind of feel defensive of having to answer that question, because, you know, who's to say that my top 10 list is worthy for you to watch? You know what I mean? Like anybody to watch. But I like how you put that. You kind of are telling somebody about yourself, and you're kind of telling them about your taste in movies, and that your taste in movies tells them something about yourself. And then also you're talking about the art form also. So that's a very structural, what's the word? Pragmatic? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Sure.
That is a very engineer way to put it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I like that though, because that helps my emotional bleeding heart get sewn back up and be like, calm down, Paul. Not everything's a big emotion. Calm down.
Yeah.
Big crybaby. I'm kidding. I would never call myself that or anybody that. But so that's interesting. So that historical perspective puts it in perspective for me, that it was a different venture in the 40s to know that you could only see it when it came to the traveling roadshow house or whatever it chose to come. This is French week or whatever it may be. Yeah. This is the foreign language film we're going to get for the year. So let's go see it. So that's interesting. That's a fascinating way to.
Yeah. I think everybody needs to kind of cool their jets, essentially, is what I'm saying. Like, either way, like, you shouldn't. I think that, like, probably turns out that Jean Dielman may not be the greatest film of all time, but neither is Vertigo or Citizen Kane. Big deal, you know. Like, that's it. It's not about like it's not about like winning a medal. It's about, like, I think, getting eyeballs. You know that. And
well, you put it in perspective. By this amount of people think this film is their favorite film.
No, this film is one of the top 10 films.
Right.
That's it. That's the minimum. Like, that's the criteria. It's in their top 10, and it was the one that was the most in the most people's top 10.
Isn't that what preferential ballots are?
It's not preferential ballots, because, like, the way that the Oscars work, how you explained it to me, is it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you get more points if you're 1 versus if you're 5. But if there's more 5s and only one person has a 1, well, guess what? The 5 jumps above the 1.
Coda.
That's there you go. So that's a totally different situation. Whereas that's why if you look at the list, there's like 28 films that are tied for 73rd. You know what I mean? Like, it's because they all got the same number of votes. You know, they all got the same number of instances on lists. So last thing I'll say is that there are a lot of new movies on this list. Portrait of a Lady on Fire is on the list, and it only came out 3 years ago. I mean, Moonlight is on the list. So it's there are movies that are more contemporary, and I think that are definitely from filmmakers and from points of view that previously were not represented on the list. And I think that is not, it's definitely intentional by the people that put it on the list. And if that can get more people to get their eyeballs on those films, then I think it does what this list is supposed to do. So
have you seen that meme real quick? Cause I know we're running a little bit late, but have you seen that meme where the guy's sitting in front of like the table and it has a skirt around it and it says, so-and-so did this, prove me wrong. Have you seen that?
I've seen that.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Something like that. That's not verbatim. Moonlight doesn't deserve to be on that list. Prove me wrong. Portrait of a Lady on Fire doesn't deserve to be on that list.
But what people are doing is they're putting up Portrait of a Lady on Fire and Raging Bull and saying like, why is this one in there and this one's not? So that's how they're couching arguments. And it's like it's not a direct competition because it's not a competition.
I have things about Raging Bull that people might not want to hear about, so we'll leave that one alone.
I mean, I'm using that as an example.
Listen,
but
if somebody had shown me this list and I saw a Portrait of a Lady on Fire, I would have been like, yes. And then somebody like you just told me Raging Bull is not on it. It would not even have crossed my mind.
You'd have been like, fine. Yeah.
No, I just would not have thought, why isn't Raging Bull on it? That wouldn't have crossed my mind.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Parasite's on there too. Of course.
I wasn't even going to ask because I was like, of course it is.
Of course it is. Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is.
But I think that those are the ones that we've already seen. Like those aren't actually that exciting to me. It's the other ones that I'm like, I've never even heard of that movie. Who is this filmmaker? This filmmaker's on there twice. What is going on? That kind of a thing. So yeah, you should check it out. I think it's interesting to dig into and to figure out like, which one is the movie that I'm going to watch first. So it's kind of cool. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can check us out on facebook.com/actorandengineer. You can tweet us at actorengineer, and we're on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast. And we'll see you next time.